She is the executive director and president of Camera, the organization she has directed for 30 years. Camera pioneered media monitoring, research, and public activism to promote accurate, balanced coverage of Israel and the Middle East. It monitors media from the UK, Arabic and Hebrew media, and Spanish language media. It has 65,000 members and has offices in 4 U.S. cities and in Jerusalem. Ms. Levin's articles are found in numerous publications. I'm not going to read all of them. Prominently the Wall Street Journal and Jerusalem Post, and we are very, very pleased to welcome Ms. Levin to Orange County and to our Temple.
Well, thank you so much. It's great to be here, and it's great to see you, and thank you for anyone who's joined us today who's not familiar with us. So I think we are actually, it is an incredible moment to be talking to you about media problems. Are you familiar with the cartoon?
Yes.
Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about that. But let me just, I'm going to walk you through a few things about Camera and a little bit about the history of Israel in the media, just briefly, because it's very interesting. Say in 1948, when Israel was reconstituted, there was general happiness in the media about it. Even the New York Times had come to terms, after much gnashing of teeth, about the fact that there would be a Jewish state, and this was positive. And that lasted for some time. In 1967, when Israel was, as we know, surrounded and under great threat. If you look at the New York Times coverage of that, it is cheerleading. There is relief. There are the heroic Israelis, the heroic Jews who have survived. In 73, this is wars, obviously, I'm mentioning. The 73 war was greeted also with a sense of alliance with Israel's plight, but there were signs of, a little bit of criticism, even though they were invaded. On Yom Kippur. The editorial in the New York Times about it mentioned that, yes, Yom Kippur, but it was also Ramadan. Now, Krieger, think about that.
Yeah.
But something happened very important in 1977. In 1977, the founding party, the Labor Party, the Kibbutzniks, the party of Ben-Gurion and Rabin, lost to Menachem Begin. And there was a huge, so that the Israeli media, which had long supported in general the Labor Party and the policies, the conduct of the country became very critical. And the global media began to echo that criticism, that the country had been hijacked by these Luddites, these backward people. So that was 77. By 82, with Begin and Sharon in the saddle, and the war, and this the first supposed war of choice, which was the invasion of Lebanon, things changed radically. And that is a huge turning point, and that is when Camera was founded. Their books have been written about that coverage. Zev Chafetz wrote a terrific book called Double Vision about the absolutely insane coverage by the Washington Post and NBC and others. So, 82, then that's a data point, and that's a data point that is crucial. From there on, things subside, and then they erupt, but that is a true turning point, 82. So, 80, I think it was December 9th, 87 was the eruption of the first Intifada, which is really marked as 88, but that was another very, very serious eruption. That's when I personally got involved. And I heard about Camera, which had already been founded in DC, partly because of the Washington Post being so horrendous. A group of citizens got together and just created this committee. And they got that name, which was a clever name, wasn't it, Camera? So that's when I got involved. I started the New England branch, which eventually became the national branch. In 2000, with the second Intifada, there was yet another huge surge of intense coverage, and despite the fact that it was Israel being blown up in buses and so on in cafes, still the coverage had a lot to do with if Israel were a little more forthcoming, this might not be happening. So that is the backdrop, and along the way there have been interesting counterexamples. One in 2006, the Hezbollah war, remember? Actually, that was fascinating. In that case, Israel was actually treated with considerable sympathy, partly because they were on the receiving, so clearly on the receiving end of this onslaught of rockets. So anyway, that's a sort of overview, and we can bring it up to the present as we go. But that's kind of the history. Israel went from being, the poster child of a feisty, young, battling, more or less socialistic kibbutznik society, and then straying from its roots. I'm speaking now more or less from the point of view of the media, into its current situation. The current prime minister of now almost 10 years is not well liked, you may have noticed, in the media. So there are many factors, and many of which do echo how things are reported in Israel, which is why we have a Hebrew department in Israel. So Camera got started, as Sandra said, we really pioneered this whole thing. There was no such thing as what we do. It never existed, which is to combine activism, and we're activists, with a sort of academic level analysis. Because you can't approach journalists and editors if you are not serious, if you are not nailed down, if you don't have the facts. You cannot go to the editors of the New York Times and win them over, get a correction, get something fixed if you don't have it really nailed down. And that's why we are the Committee for Accuracy. That really is what we do. But we combine it, as you'll see, with some fairly assertive action. So let's kind of just flip the next one. And that's sort of our logo, slogan, because facts matter. Okay. And this is, I have to turn my head a little, just to spell out a little bit of how it looks. This is our work, the American media, the British media, Spanish language media, because obviously the British media, the BBC is spilling into your office, your homes. The Spanish language media, with the very large Spanish language Latino population in America. Obviously, this is something important to us, especially California, Florida, New York area. But also Spain and Latin America. This is a huge population, and Spain, as you may know, from time to time, ADL does global assessments of anti-Semitism. Spain it ranks very high, and right now there's an Iranian tilted regime there that is extremely problematic for the media as well. Then we also, as I mentioned, many of the problems that we encounter here or globally originate in some of the coverage that is produced in Israel. How many of you know about Haaretz? But there is it's nothing. Haaretz has an English platform that's very influential, and things that get said by Gideon Levy and Amira Haas and others spread around the world. So we started to address that. And Arabic, we just started an Arabic department, which is very exciting because nobody's done what we're doing, which is critiquing. We're not like memory, if you're familiar with some of the translation organizations, which are wonderful. They don't do criticism. We're critics. And then we also have been very concerned over the years about what goes on in Christian, in things like journals and magazines and documentaries, proclamations, and so on. So we have two fantastic staff who deal with that in our partnership with Christians and Jews. Our campus department is unique in that it taps into our very deep academic component, so we really provide very high quality programs and material for them. And finally, the school curriculum area, which is really depressing, not to depress you, but there's a lot going on in the teaching, what's happening sort of stealth-like to curriculum materials. So anyway, that's the overview. And we have 65,000 members, 19,000 activists, and 50 staff. So this is just a snapshot of a few of our people, just to get an idea. Our senior research analysts, many of them actually, Alex Safian's, he's our associate director. He's actually a PhD physicist from Harvard. Tamar is, and he's been with us 26 years. Tamar's been with us 20 years. She started when she was about 15. She's the head of our Israel office, and if you go to Israel, be sure to go visit our office. And Gilad, he also comes from the sciences, as does Ricky Hollander. And this is an interesting, actually, element of the staff, that so many of them come from data-driven, professions. So I'm just talk a little bit about some of the things that they do. First of all, to again stress that we deal with facts. Cameron does not take political positions. We are not political. We do not comment on policy. We don't advocate for or against a political figure, a policy, not for or against settlements. Nothing to do with policy. It's a very nice, comfortable zone to be in. All we deal with is it factual? Is it reported in a balanced way? Is there anything grossly omitted? And that's a great way to jump in and tackle the problems. So, some of the issues that we've been dealing with just recently, the one up on the right, the New York Times is simply off the rails. It has, and we can talk about some of the potential whys, but at the beginning of last year, the beginning of 2018, the new young publisher A.G. Salzberger, that's Arthur Gregg Salzberger, made a statement, sent a letter to his staff and the public to say, I just want to pledge once again that we are devoted to rigorous coverage, and if we make a mistake, we are going to be accountable. We stand ready to, to correct anything that's wrong. The reality is something altogether different, and Gilad Enid, who wrote a piece that was published in Commentary a month or so ago, kept a timeline, and he chronicled everything all through 2018, one after another. Issues involving both errors, gross omissions, in which Israel is invariably at fault. Just to read you a couple of excerpts. So, a reporter, for example, mockingly dismissed the idea, this is just one of his items in the timeline, that Palestinians pay money to the families of terrorists. They mocked this idea, and they called it the claim of right-wing conspiracists. Of course, the Palestinian Authority has long rewarded Palestinians who kill Jews, whether shooting, stabbing, blowing them up, or running them down in the streets in trucks. Their families receive remuneration. And in this case, the Times did correct this error, saying it's not a conspiracy theory. Here's another one. Mahmoud Abbas called Israel's Netanyahu a son of a dog. That has a recent familiar ring, doesn't it? Called Netanyahu a son of a dog in a deranged speech, and the paper completely ignored it. On the other hand, several years ago, when Netanyahu said a statement by an American diplomat was, quote, unacceptable and incorrect, the Times slammed the Prime Minister for being unfair in a news story and an editorial. And that is precisely the kind of example that sort of fills the pages of the news and editorial side. Consider this headline, published during the wave of Palestinian riots along the back of the border since last year, remember? It's still continuing. The Great March of Return riots. This was a headline, quote, battle-weary, Hamas gives peaceful protests a chance. A few days before that, Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar declared to Palestinians gathered at the Israeli frontier, we will take down the border and we will tear out their hearts from their bodies, a chilling and illuminating threat that the Times never recorded. So that is the timeline and all of our other coverage. It chronicles this really, really deep and relentless problem that we're seeing at the Times. So that we write about, we generate alerts, we pound them with mail, we communicate with them back and forth, and as I said, sometimes they correct, many times they do not. And we have been finding a trend toward less accountability, frankly. The other element that's just touched on in one of these, the problem of anti-Semitism is something that they have had just a complete inability or unwillingness to report honestly. So that they hide, they cover up what Ilan Omar says, they cover up what Rashida Tlaib says, they cover up the true intentions of BDS, the Boycott, Divestment, and Sanctions Campaign, which, as you know, is a campaign that's strong on campuses and is strong, in European entities. So, but they treat this, they define BDS very often as an effort to promote Palestinian rights, not an effort to destroy the state of Israel. So you have to just, when you see this constant diminishing of the threats to Israel on the one hand, and the sort of whitewashing of the, of the conduct of these, of the actual anti-Semites at times. Are you familiar with the Jewish Voice for Peace? You are? Is everyone?
No.
No? This is something you should really know about. And if you go to our website, Ricky Hollander did a fantastic analysis of it. Very important to be aware of this. JVP is not only active on campuses where they are really toxic, they are driving many of the anti-Israel campaigns. Actually, they're often parts of SJP, Students for Justice in Palestine, which is normally perceived as a sort of more Muslim-populated group. In fact, many of the JVP Jewish kids are participants, and they are their name is quite a misnomer. They're not Jewish and they're not a voice for peace, but they need to be understood for what they're doing. They're involved in all kinds of boycott programs, not just on campus, but in communities. There's another one starting up in Boston and Cambridge that JVP will be driving. They have been instrumental, and you're probably familiar with mainline churches having passed anti-Israel resolutions. JVP has been in those meetings wearing their little t-shirts that say Jewish Voice for Peace. Well, Jewish Voice for Peace, if the Jewish Voice for Peace is in favor of this resolution, why shouldn't we, we Christians feel the same? And it's so they are really, they're not massive in number, but they are strategic in what they do, and they tap into there are groups that want to think that they have a Jewish ally in their negative, nefarious efforts, and so JVP becomes that ally. So it's not a new thing to have some people of this kind really aligned with the most extreme anti-Israel activity. So let's jump to the next slide. Did we miss one? Is that right? Is that right? Okay. Anyway, from time to time, when the letter writing and the phone calls, when we get frustrated, we put up our billboard. So we have a billboard which we love. It's on a building that faces the newsroom of the New York Times. So this one reads, while Hamas firebombs Israel, the New York Times in flames with biased coverage.
3 stories high.
That's 3 stories high, and it's directly facing the newsroom. So actually, we've used the billboard from time to time over the last few years, and last fall, the vendor called me and said, Andrea, just want to let you know, give you a heads up. The New York Times ad people called me. They wanted to rent this thing for a year. And he said, I wanted to give you notice about that. I said, oh my God. So I called some people. I said, listen to this. And they said, okay, we're getting the billboard back. So this just went up. And ironic in light of what's just been happening. We know that it bothers them. We know they don't like it, obviously. But the interesting thing is that we've had the board on and off for maybe 4 or 5 years. It doesn't stop them from communicating with us. People have said in the past, "Oh, you got to be careful. You're going to cut off communication." The executive editor, I was emailing with him on Friday. So it's a curious thing. It doesn't work that way, but it is. They have to know how the public feels. Which brings us to this horrendous thing, which appeared on April 25th. And that was a Thursday, which was the last day or so of Passover. It was on the internet, in the international edition, which none of us would see here in the States, and not online. But it's, you know, I just was mentioning that Abbas calls Israel, or Netanyahu, the son of a dog. In Islam, dogs are filthy. They are not pets like we think of them, like our little Tibetan terrier. They are vile, disgusting creatures. So it's a very it's not like we might think of it. And of course, this is, you know what it is. You see what it is. It is this dog, and in true sort of Der Stürmer fashion, leading the American president around.
What's the background, the red background?
Sorry?
What's the meaning of the red background?
Good question.
Blood?
I haven't thought about that.
Blood?
I don't know. But he's wearing a kippah. He's been turned into sort of Judaized almost. He's
Yes.
blind, and this is the dog. And so next kind of. So this is I wanted you to see this. This is the cartoonist Antonio Moreira in Tunis. He told CNN the cartoon was not intended to be anti-Semitic. It was a political statement stating that Jews are not above criticism, and Tunis said outrage was, quote, made through the Jewish propaganda machine, which is anytime there's criticism, it's because there's someone anti-Semitic on the other side, and that's not the case. So, as you see, he not contrite. So the first thing we did, so that was a Thursday, we really heard about it on Friday. So we posted this infographic on Saturday just to, start to, on our social media, to start to clarify for people how disgusting it is. And it is a perfect analogy to the FDR, this is the Nazi era cartoon of FDR holding up the menorah, stomping on the flag. And it just blew up on social media, 160,000 views in about 2 hours. So they were completely taken off guard, it seems. So the first thing that they did sort of go, oh wait, that wasn't right. So they issued this first editor's note on a tweet, a political cartoon in the International Print Edition of the New York Times on Thursday, included anti-Semitic tropes depicting the Prime Minister of Israel as a guide dog with a Star of David collar, leading the President of the United States shown wearing a skull cap. The image was offensive, and it was an error of judgment to publish it. It was provided by the New York Times News Service and Syndicate, which has since deleted it. No apology. And kind of bloodless, sort of a bloodless, rather, next is.
Excuse me, one comment.
Sorry.
I'm not for the New York Times, but didn't the New York Times have a long editorial?
Coming.
Oh, it's
Wait.
coming.
Then, amazing, I'm just doing a little chronology here. So this was the 27th and 28th. Incredibly, they ran another cartoon, which is not quite as crudely anti-Semitic, I guess. But it's curious that they're, once again, denigrating the Israeli Prime Minister, bringing it that apparently he's a narcissistic character who's taking a selfie of him as Moses, and so it's linking. I don't understand the eyes, the blacked out eyes, but crazy that this got through. And then one of the most remarkable things, I don't think I've ever seen anything like this. Do you all know Bret Stephens of the New York Times? So, personally, so Bret wrote an unbelievable column, just eviscerating the paper for the cartoon, but saying, and he was 100% right, as we've just shown you the year before, the constant denigrating of Israel. The cartoons are a natural progression. They're in perfect keeping with everything that's been reported. There was nothing unnatural about this cartoon following everything that was happening, and that is precisely what he said. And they let him say it. He at the very end, his caveat was not a caveat, but he did say, and it's a calumny to say anyone here is anti-Semitic. And so, okay, fine. Who knows if they're anti-Semites? I have no idea. We can't read anyone's mind or heart. We know what they put in the paper. And what they put in the paper adds up to a very anti-Israel, anti-Zionist picture. So, at any rate, that was a big deal. Okay. Then we got an apology. This was tweeted. We are deeply sorry for the publication of an anti-Semitic political cartoon last Thursday in the print edition of the New York Times that circulates outside the United States, and we are committed to making sure nothing like this happens again. Such imagery is always dangerous, and at a time when anti-Semitism is on the rise worldwide, it's all the more unacceptable. We have investigated how this happened and learned that because of faulty process, a single editor working without adequate oversight downloaded the syndicated cartoon and made the decision to include it on the opinion pages. The matter remains under review, and we are evaluating our internal processes and training. We anticipate significant changes. Okay, that's better. What's next? So at that point, we are starting to write the same day. We're posting an analysis of all of this. So, okay. We did an alert the same day, and we encouraged people to write, to call, to attend a rally that others had organized. We didn't organize it, but we urged people to attend. Alan Dershowitz spoke, others, Doug Heiken, I think. And yeah, Alan said, and look at that billboard up there, join camera. So that was nice. So, and they got lots of coverage of that. So, okay. And then as someone mentioned, we've heard that internally they had no idea how bad this was. They thought it was just, bad cartoon, we're going to correct it. And it just blew up. It blew up and up and up. Political figures were denouncing it. So then they started writing more things. And here's A.G. Sulzberger, as I said, the new publisher, writing another mea culpa. Okay. And then another one, and this was quite detailed. This one goes into quite a lot of detail, talking about their own, to some extent, their own terrible history with the Holocaust. A little bit, referring to it, and referring to some things more in more detail, things that they intend to be doing. To more analysis of what went wrong, to instituting awareness of what anti-Semitic bigotry is. We'll see, and some other things, just reviews that they're going to be doing. So, I mean, there were a few discordant lines, I thought, but 95% was good. And this is 100% because of the explosion. Had there been no reaction, there would have been none of this. There would have been that little stupid tweet from day one, and they would have thought it was over. So, okay. Who read it? Who read? Oh, I think the question was who read that sort of longer mea culpa. I think people have been so closely paying attention to this issue that it's been widely read and recirculated, and but everything is in what they do. Everything will be in what they do.
Right.
And what it's going to be also what they do on the news pages. So they've run, it's hard to recap all the offenses of the last year. Recommending a book that's literally a Holocaust, written by a Holocaust denier. That was a recommended reading in December.
You are overlooking one element of their apology. In the same time frame when they did the mea culpa, they reversed their position 1 week earlier when they claimed that Jesus was a Palestinian.
There you go. This was sort of in the mix of this crazy period, and that was that they published an op-ed by a Palestinian who said that Jesus was a Palestinian, and they let it go.
Can I say one thing about that?
And they corrected that.
Can I say one thing about that?
Sure.
But we are the Palestinians. That's what how we were referred to.
That's fine, they didn't do
Yes,
that.
important. We are the Palestinians.
That's not,
You're right. But
Yeah, that's how it was referred to in the 1900s.
Of course,
As we
I
started
know.
to move to
He
Israel,
did not
we
mean
were the
that.
Palestinians.
Did not mean that.
right.
One of the things that is of great concern to us, one of the things that concerns us a lot, and this in the previous slide that I showed, had to do with this failure to cover Ilan Omar accurately. And what they're doing, one of the things they did was to say Ilan Omar was only criticized by some Jews. Now, Ilan Omar, one of the first statements was by Pelosi and Steny Hoyer and 3 or 4 other non-Jews. They want to constantly they push it aside. Ilan Omar is a politically correct figure in this new identity politics world, which is one of the worst things that's driving this problem. That she is, a refugee, a woman of color, a Muslim, immigrant, and all of this. So it's hands off, and this is what this is what our kids are facing on campus. But the New York Times is a party to this, and they barely laid a finger on her. Anyway, I did a column just recently comparing. Do you know who Ayaan Hirsi Ali is? Anyone?
Yes.
So here you have a Somali who also was a refugee in Kenya, who was an immigrant and asylum seeker in America. It's almost parallel. There's a big difference though. Ayaan, if anyone's read her book, Infidels, a wonderful book. She talks about even her own mother blamed the Jews for everything that went wrong. It was just in the culture, it was in the air, everywhere. Oh, the Jews, they never met a Jew in Somalia, and they never met she didn't meet a Jew in Kenya. It was she got it in the madrasa, she got it in her home. It was part of life. But Ayaan, as you know, moved to Holland, and she overcame this and shed this. But it's interesting because Ayaan, I don't know if she still lives under 24-hour guard, but Ilan is lionized, and Ayaan lives a careful life because she's renounced all this, and she is an apostate. She left Islam, so she herself is in danger, whereas Ilan Omar, who's a raving anti-Semite, is lionized. But it's important. People need to understand this. It needs to be talked about and written about. I just want to mention that we have some other wonderful staff who deal with some other crucial things. Sean Burns handles our DC area activity, which is very important. Policymakers he writes and lectures about how policymakers sometimes get information from their staff who read the news, and then they kind of sum it up and give it to the congressman. So it's very important that, you know, we do this because public perception shapes public policy ultimately. So he works on that. Steve Stotsky has led the charge on this problem of indoctrination in the schools. And that was his book. Those of you who are members may have gotten a copy. If anybody else wants one, you just get in touch with us. We did a study about, now I live in Newton, it just happens, and this is a study of Newton. Our children went through the elementary school, middle school, and high school in the Newton schools. Our grandchildren are in the Newton schools, so we're rather personally invested. But it's not because of that. This happens to be a very elite school district, and it's run off the rails. The teaching of the Arab-Israeli conflict in high school, as we've documented here, Steve has, it's an echo of the New York Times narrative, and it's all about narratives. And the notion that history is a narrative and not facts is a disaster, and that is really what has been happening. So all over the country, yes, not just in Newton. Believe me, this is a monograph just to say here's a case study, because it is happening. And I read that just here in San Diego recently, that CARE was pushed out of the schools, not to be allowed to run the teaching in the schools. Is that correct? In one school district, yeah. Yeah, it's very, very, and this is the toughest thing. Very hard to find out what's going on in your schools. Very, very hard. The kids might, if the child knows that something's wrong, knows enough to know that something's wrong, if he tells his parent, the parent might say, oh, it's just that one lesson, I don't know, it's near the end of the year, let it go. So, because they're worried about their child. And so we don't get enough information. So if you know of issues in schools, please contact us, because we're trying to get this exposed so that people can tackle it. This is perhaps the most profound challenge that we face. If our kids grow up thinking, believing that essentially that New York Times narrative, then that's, the consequences are almost hard to describe. Sure.
Yes, does camera have a video that has that message?
Oh, a video of the contents of the sort of study, you mean?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. No, but it's a thought. It's a good thought. There have been some videos made having to do with this topic. Americans for Peace and Tolerance has done some work on that.
Yeah, I'm a member of University Synagogue in Irvine.
Yeah.
And I don't think we have an Israel Matters Committee. I'm not sure. I'll have to find out, but I don't think we have. And I think it would be a great idea to form one.
Yeah.
And I'd like to see if we can get something like this to present to our congregation.
Okay, well, we can talk.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, great. About this?
Yeah,
Sure.
what kind of progress have you made with school officials with this?
Well, actually, there has been progress. There's a lawsuit also. I mean, it's just, I think Newton is worse than other places probably. It's 30% Jewish, by the way. That there is a lawsuit that is in process. And we'll see how that goes. I don't know what the outcome will be. What we had to do, it was so recalcitrant, and we would ask for just give us the material. All we want to see is material, just to make our own assessment and be reassured that everything's okay. They refused to give it, so multiple Freedom of Information Act measures have. Now imagine, we are entitled, legally, you are entitled to know where your kids are being taught. You're entitled to know that. And yet, if they stonewall and refuse and don't do it, so through the efforts of very determined people, and we are determined, these emails were secured, and they're shocking. The way they talk about APAC, the way they talk about other things, the way it's very, it's been, so I think these multiple efforts have led to some improvements. We just learned that all the faculty, the social studies and English faculty, just had a training session at Brandeis. We'll see. Everything will be, the proof will be in the ultimately in what they do. But there have been signs of improvement. I will say that. But it's been hard. I'll tell you. It should not be this hard to find out what's going on in your child's school and to make sure they're not lying about the Arab-Israeli conflict. Okay, here.
Yeah, there's a through Act for America.
Mm-hmm.
They started a textbook
Right,
investigation.
yes.
Yes, and it's 30 hours, and you work with a team in your own home.
Mm-hmm.
Just on the computer. And you're given facts about what should be and what should not be in the high school or grammar school. And the problem is that Saudi Arabia has contributed a lot of money to Macmillan and Sons, who do all the publication of the schools, the textbooks, which go out to Florida, California, and they're full of errors. And there was a group that went before the California State School Board with all the misinformation that's in the World War II, about the Jews, about the Holocaust, about everything, everything that could possibly be wrong. And the California State Board ignored all the facts and all the research that had been done.
One of the things, to be honest, one of the things that we found in our analysis is it was actually less textbooks, and it was much, much more the terrible spillover of the internet. Just teachers pulling things off. I mean, stuff from PBS, stuff from lesson plans, from the New York Times, from the Guardian.
NPR.
Sorry?
NPR.
Absolutely. So it was sort of just willy-nilly something they find on the internet. So that's why the things that we've been calling for, we want transparency, we want to know what they're teaching, and rigorous vetting. I mean, there's no vetting. There's no vetting. It's the teacher goes, I was a teacher. I know teachers need material. I know how hard it is, to get everything together for 5 classes a day. But you have to have oversight. And that's what we have. We just have junk pulled off the internet and used to teach our kids. So that's a problem which we really have to face. So question right here.
So I agree with what you were saying, that the children's indoctrination is probably the most dangerous of all.
Mm-hmm.
But my question is, if the teachers are getting things off the internet or word of mouth, and they're using it didactically in the classroom, not in a textbook or anything, how do we find out? Especially if it's with younger children who wouldn't have the wherewithal.
This is why there really has to be a national awareness that there's a problem. National awareness that there is a problem and that we need to have, that there have to be standards, and that the internet is not reliable. They use Wikipedia, which can be ridiculous.
So there has to be communication to the teachers not to use it?
In terms of, are you talking about in a one-to-one situation?
Well, no, I mean, how do you stop it?
Yeah, how do you stop?
Yeah.
Well, there has to be exposure and there has to be citizen involvement. I mean, one of the things to ask, of your own situation with the teacher is, what are the materials you're using? what are the materials you're using? And if you see that there are these random things yanked off the internet, sometimes PLO websites. So then that has to be addressed. But first of all, we have to diagnose the problem. The problem is that there is unvetted material just spilling through. So, okay, this just to say we have a British project. Hadar Sella lives in the Golan Heights, and she works so hard that this is just an anecdote, in the Israeli system, she's part of our Israeli office. So in Israel, it is still a socialist country, you have to, your employees can't work too much. So at any rate, so she works nonstop. We have to tell her, stop working, take a vacation, take a day off. Because she's monitoring the BBC. That's her job. So she works nonstop, and it's a complex process. Okay.
Yes, question.
And you read about what's going on in the modern period of the conflict. If you don't hear that the Palestinians have repeatedly turned down a state, that is the big omission. And that is what happens again and again. The Palestinians are suffering, they're in dire straits, they're frustrated, they've been in all these various kinds of difficulty, but their leaders turn down the state multiple times. So it changes the whole picture to know that they could have had a state but refused it. Okay. And I mentioned the Hebrew, and that's Levin, who is really problematic, so we deal with him. Okay, and Arabic, and as I said, he's dealing with Rashida Tlaib in the Arabic dimension. But it's very exciting because we get things fixed in Arabic. Okay. And last year we got a record 206 corrections on the record. Corrections are not for all of us to read. Corrections are an internal impact on the institution because they're embarrassed. It's not so much that it fixes except that in the age of the internet, the error is gone instead of living eternally online. It's been fixed. And our partnership with Christians and Jews is really so important to us because there is a tremendous reservoir of support in much of the Christian community, and because of that, because the evangelical community is so sympathetic in large measure, there is also an attempt to undermine that by our adversaries. So there have been all kinds of conferences and speakers and efforts and videos and documentaries aimed at basically saying that Jesus is a Palestinian myth and other things, and that Israel brutalizes Palestinian Christians. So we have a wonderful pair of analysts who deal with that. Okay. And that's who they are. Just keep going. And that was a group of Brazilian pastors who the Brazilians have, as you know probably, there's a very strong evangelical community in Brazil. We actually, Boston, New England area, large Portuguese-speaking evangelical community, Hispanic evangelical community, African-American evangelical community. So we're working with a lot of these amazing people. They have these rallies in the evening to celebrate Israel. So we're networking these people together. And this is our campus team. They're awesome. Okay. And that's just a little metric of the things we're doing. Go ahead. I want to tell you something about this, because this is kind of encapsulates some of the problems that we encounter. So we're different from most other organizations. We use this very deep research component that we have to help the students. and we create independent, autonomous pro-Israel groups on campuses. We create them or we help ones that might be underfunded. They may not be under the Hillel. They can be collaborating with the Hillel, but they may not be under the Hillel. And I'm going to give you a quick anecdote related to that. We have another program, so that's the independent groups, and then the other group is called the Camera Fellows. These are individuals who are they're really leaders on campus. They write well. We vet them. They send us resumes and writing samples, and they become eyes and ears for us on the campus. They write op-eds and so on, and they do some programs. So here's what happened a couple weeks ago at Brooklyn College. Israel Apartheid Week, this was a bad, hot spring, really, for Israel Apartheid Week, I have to say. And so at this particular college, which has been a hotbed, Brooklyn College, and our kids wanted to go out and table on the quad because they knew Israel Apartheid Week, the SJP kids were going to do their thing. And they were told, no, they shouldn't do that. They were told, and we collaborate with Hillel. It's just that in this case, they were told not to do this by the Hillel, and they were very upset. Aliyah is the blonde girl, called us, and she was practically in tears. She said, we want to go out and we want to just, put a table up and distribute material. And so we overnighted them all this stuff. It's just academic stuff. There's a big map there that shows tiny Israel and all the repressive regimes around it. It's information. So they set up their table. They were told, don't, whatever you do, bring a flag. And of course, they brought flags. And wore their IDF t-shirts. And guess what happened? Nothing. The kids walked by, the Jewish kids, and said they were so proud. They had some arguments with the SJP, kids standing next to them. Professors went by and said, hey, good job, kids. It was fine. There is a real issue. We need to help the kids be strong. They want to be strong, but sometimes they're told, just don't, it could cause problems. So it's a challenge for us. We want to be collegial. We work with all these groups. But these kids, there would have been nothing if these nice kids hadn't gone out and done this. And really the lesson is, it was fine. But we've had this happen again and again. Just want to tell you, there's Tridents for Israel. I think it's the U.S., the San Diego State, UC San Diego, maybe. We have a group there that is fabulous. It's just a wonderful group. So anyway, I'm happy to take campus questions now. Okay, back here.
I came today in full support of camera. I support camera. I went on March of the Living with my senior daughter last year, and I have to take a break every couple of days with the camera feed because I cannot sleep at night. I am emotionally nauseated, etc., etc. Because I have actually seen the ultimate outcome of my concerns with the college campus is these kids are going to grow up. We are not going to be here. Those of us who know the actual history of the state of Israel are not going to be here. So my question to you is, how do you sleep at night? You have this wonderful calm demeanor. I don't mean just taking a vacation. How do you, where do you compartmentalize?
My husband's a psychiatrist.
Okay. I'm a physician also. Let me direct my question to you then. So help me,
But he has a great answer. He says, aggravate them.
Aggravate them more than they aggravate you, that's the key.
Yeah.
And also, I guess people have said to us over the years about our whole, stuff, don't you guys get depressed? And we say, no, we just don't, honestly. It's not that we don't get mad or get frustrated or upset, but it's...
But let me add something to that. In fact, Part of why they don't get depressed is because they know they're fighting back all the time, and they can see the effect of fighting back. The people out there, the Jews out there who get upset, aren't doing anything, feel helpless in the face of it, and are constantly bombarded, they're going to get depressed. So the more you get engaged, the more you're actually taking up the struggle and fighting back, the less likely the president will be depressed about it, because you feel like you're, again, accomplishing something.
With respect to Cameron, I get, and it's wonderful that you're factually oriented, but just this past week, there was an incident at Emory. And for those who don't know about Emory, these Jewish students in the dormitories were given eviction notices as a hoax by, basically, it was Justice for Students in Palestine.
Right.
And I don't know if there was a connection, but one of the other facts you mentioned about Israel as a state, it's often overlooked that 1 billion Jews were kicked out of their Arab countries. I don't know if that was the connection with the eviction notice. Are you doing anything coming in that kind of incident, as opposed to clarifying facts?
It's a very, very good question, because, and you know, this is an interesting example, and keep this in mind. This worked because we had the kids there who were able to, you know, stand up and do it. You can't go beyond where the kids are. You can't force them. You can't parachute in. And if the institution on the ground is, you know, is kind of paralyzed or doesn't know what to do, it's tough. I was in a meeting last week with 3 Harvard deans and a young Harvard postdoc from the Harvard School of Public Health, who gave a phenomenal presentation to them. I mean, he did that sort of Israeli thing where he told them that he was coming alone, and he brought 3 other agents. And they said, "What's going on?" He said, "Oh, never mind." So anyway, I was there with actually with the Hillel director and VDL and the IAC, the Israeli American Council, which we work very closely with in all around the country. And what Yoav, who's this very likable scientist, you know, we went to Weitzman and now he's at Harvard. The story he told was amazing to hear. It's not an answer to your question, but it is something we need to package. He told the story of how when he started 2 years ago, he came onto the campus, and innocent that he was, he passed by and he saw this great big thing that was the apartheid wall. And he couldn't believe what he was seeing. He said he couldn't even go into his office. He went into a restaurant and sat there in shock. And he couldn't even go to work, go in for a few days. And he sent a note to the deans and said, "What is going on?" And he heard nothing. Now, what triggered our meeting last week was that Harvard, I mean, it's been a terrible spring, truthfully. It's been awful. UMass last night, Mark Lamont Hill, Linda Sarsour, and Roger Wise. And Mark Lamont Hill was at Harvard, and they were chanting "From the river to the sea." So our Yoav now managed to get the attention of these 3 deans. One is the dean of diversity and, you know, inclusion and benevolence and whatever else it is. And so what he did was fascinating. He played right into their identity politics thing. He talked about, he had a slide, and he talked about, first of all, the experience that he had when he showed up and saw this thing. And then he had a slide with pictures of him and his twin brother, IDF uniforms. His mother was in the IDF. And then pictures of all these beautiful people, girls and guys and IDF soldiers. And he said, and he had a map of the region and tiny Israel. He said it's the Israel Defense Forces. He said, you talk about identity. My whole identity is defending my country. And do you have any comprehension what this does to me, to my whole existence, to have, because on that apartheid wall was a picture of a soldier pointing a gun at a little child, holding a flower. And that's what sent him into this. So, it's very interesting. They sat there just sort of stunned. I don't know what the long-lasting impact will be. One of them said to him, the dean of education for the school said, so how do you feel about Harvard? And he said, I hate it. She said, you hate it? He said, yes, I hate it. I hate what it's doing. So, I mean, it is, when you read about kids walking around on campus and they're upset by these things, they are upset. They are really, really upset. But Yoav is a fighter, and he said, you know, let's get some speakers in here. And I think we have to wake up these, you know, we have to wake up all of these administrators. They have to hear this, because they're only hearing that other side.
As a follow-up?
The aggression is coming against us. The aggression is against our kids. The aggression is, we don't fight that way. Not that we shouldn't, maybe, except we don't usurp institutions and rip them from their ethical roots. We don't, it's, we write letters and have meetings. But we need to be strong. At least we need to be able to go on the quad and stand up. And so, anyway, I said in this meeting, I said, we have not cracked this code. And we haven't. We haven't figured out the free speech versus the, but one of these deans said, you know, I don't think, we could probably change a policy that didn't allow gigantic things on the quad. Okay, that's progress. Seriously, why do you have to have a giant structure that's political, attacking another people? Get them out, get rid of that, so they can have a little poster or whatever.
What about inciting? I mean.
Yeah, of course it's incitement. I don't know who had their hand up first.
Two quick questions,
Sure.
last
Yeah.
two.
Yep.
Does Tamara have representation at UC Irvine?
That's what I was going to ask.
Oh, UC Irvine?
Yeah,
I don't know. I don't have the list.
They need
it
one.
Yeah,
They need one.
I don't know, truthfully. I just don't have, we have about 85 campuses, so I don't have the,
Well, how would that work if that were to be desirable?
if I were to be,
Desirable.
the desire, the important thing is there's a cadre of students who want to work with us. That's number one. And our team is out there all the time, throwing the net out. Here we are. By the way, we are so generous. We give them more money than anybody. You want a speaker, you want food, you want advertising, we'll do it all.
I'm just curious, is it your experience that the Jews are waking up? Because I'm 89 and I grew up in Boyle Heights, and I can remember as a kid hearing people say, "Oi, they need another pogrom, the Jews are hiding their heads," that we wake up when there's trouble. Are you finding?
Well, that's a fascinating point. That cartoon, I've never seen wall-to-wall unity like that. Every JCRC, every organization was writing letters against it. I mean, it's pretty bad, but still. It's terrible. Disconnect, just one last thought. A lot of the New York Times stuff, the New York Times has been taken to task by its former executive editor, Joe Abramson, for its over-the-top, insane editorializing against Trump. Now, that has, unfortunately, a spillover. That's bad in itself. She says you can be critical, but you're mixing everything up. You've got opinion on the front page. And the spillover is that since Trump is pro-Israel, then Israel is by association tarred. So there is some of that. There is definitely some of that going on.
My granddaughter I just wanted to say one thing. San Diego State does have a Camera Fellow on campus. My granddaughter is very active in all of those things.
So is that Dragons for Israel?
And
Is
she
Dragons
was-
for Israel? Is
I
that something
think
else?
so. I didn't,
They're
I
fabulous.
just called her to check, but she said she had been, and a lot of my court people know, Ari was doing the same thing.
Yeah.
And she was chased by another group, and she had to go hide in the bookstore because, and she has long hair, and they started grabbing her by her hair.
Are you
And
kidding?
she hid until dark with another girl.
Are you kidding?
So that
That's,
they could get,
that's,
so they could get
legal.
back to their dorm. There were some gentlemen there that did walk them back after. But this
That's
is going
illegal,
on.
that's legally
Yep,
actionable.
it's happening.
Did she take it to the
Did she take it
administration?
to-
She took it to the administration,
She
and
go to
they
the
said,
police.
well, we allow
She should
both
file
on
a-
campus. She's graduating next week, but but these things happen, and she got so active, she's taking groups to Israel,
Oh, good for her.
non-Jewish groups,
Good.
and to explain things and that,
Great.
but it happens all
Yes,
the
yes,
time.
we gotta be together, more of us
Right.
and faster.
Thank you, Andrea, for your wonderful presentation, which I'm
Yes.
sure is valuable to everybody. Spread the word about camera, and we can't thank you enough
very
for
much.
coming out.
Are there any handouts